through a program called the Mataman program. Right? A social worker of sorts, but currently into disaster management.
Thank you, Brother Pierre, and of course, Bishop Garraway.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I am Bishop Gavin Garraway. I'm the senior pastor of Glory Church. This is my 36th anniversary year of pastoring, and traveled all wide across the world, and married into a far culture, a woman from the nation of Kingdom of Eswatini, which is formerly Swaziland, and I'm enjoying the experience. It keeps me alive. This area of family is not something I would have picked myself to get involved in, but something that God put upon me, and I do my best to help people. I don't believe myself to have all the answers in any particular way, but I do believe that because of certain difficulties I went through and having fought for answers, I've gotten some that even if people don't exactly see it, it will help them to think. Because I think one of the biggest problems we have in the church is that unlike how Jesus spoke in parables to allow people to think, we don't do that to people. So sometimes we as pastors just want to control thought. So my aim really and truly is to make you think and help you to think and to have that aha moment to consider another perspective as to why we are having the difficulties we are having in this particular arena. I do believe that the family is the most important factor in society, in developing a society, besides the church. And therefore, I think we need anything we can do towards helping this. And therefore, I commend the originators of this program and for all the people that will serve, regardless of your viewpoint. So God bless you as we talk and as we do battle.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. And welcome to our YouTube audience. We want to encourage our audience both on YouTube as well as on Zoom to place your questions in the chat. If you would like to ask a question verbally, raise your hand and we'll respond to you. And we love to hear from you. All right. So we are talking about marriage, where the rubber hits the road, part 1. And our objectives for this segment is that the audience will understand that during marriage, couples should develop the skill of conflict management and the use of biblical and other tools to resolve conflict, because conflict is a constant in life. It's one of those things, it's like change. It's always there. There's always a difference of opinion. And then the second objective is that couples should develop the mindset and skill of establishing win-win agreements. Establishing win-win agreements. We do not have to always focus on a winner and a loser. We can both win. And our esteemed panelists will give you some tips on how you can establish win-win agreements, or win-win when dealing with conflict, how to establish win-win agreements. So let's just dive in and look at our first questions for our panelists. And the first question is a little lengthy, so bear with me as I set it up and then ask the question. Someone said that marriage is like two rivers that meet, and at that point, they then converge, that is destructive. At the point where they converge is destructive, but follow their path downstream. They flow in such harmony as though they never met, right? Once they meet, they flow downstream in harmony. Here's the question for you. What would you say are the main contributing factors for the regular fights in early marriage? All right. Now, if you had a few seconds to pause and ponder on that, I'm going to start with Bishop Garraway.
Sure, no problem at all. Each has its privilege. I would say, hey, I'm a grandfather. I should be a great grandfather in a few years.
Wow.
to dye my beard. I say I have to let people know I am.
That's right. That's
It's
yes.
an achievement.
That's
It's
a
an
stamp
achievement.
of of seniority.
Absolutely.
And let me say this, I believe two very simple terms, one, forethought, and secondarily, preparation. Because of the fact that we don't actually, for us men, we get trapped by the seeing of our eyes, right, Pastor Anthony? Many a times, if we don't go beyond that by considering what are the important elements in our lives, what do we consider as our purpose, as our prime efforts, etc., then we are going to be problematic. I like to say what the reason, we think it's very spiritual, the way that Elizabeth prayed when he said, Lord, let it be that the woman that I asked for a drink of water offers not just the water me, but to water all the camels.
Right.
You see, his master's business was moving herds and flocks and all these different things in the wilderness. And therefore that was appropriate. When Jacob fell in love with Rachel and Leah, they were shepherdesses. When Boaz fell in love with Ruth, she was working the field and he was the owner of the field. So there was a consideration. When Solomon had his 700 wives, they were all princesses. They understood a certain dimension of the political realm for which his marriages were convened. His marriages was not based out of lust, but out of showing up kingdom, borderlines, etc. And therefore, sometimes when a man does not know himself, and therefore he has little consideration as to where he is heading in life, then he can take somebody's daughter on a very harsh journey because he is growing and he's changing, and he could not forewarn her concerning that, and it becomes problematic. And then secondly, once there's the forethought, there's the preparations in going in that particular direction. In other words, what am I going to need? Is this person, she's going to be my helpmeet. What is God saying to her? Because one of the things about it is that when we get down to the last question, which deals with submission, I will deal with it. I will have something I want to share specifically in that area. But God didn't create men to crush women. You understand? So when you understand what your woman has in her heart and what her desire is. So when I met with my wife and I found out what her dreams were, it turned me on. You understand what I'm saying? So I don't just build my life surrounding my pastorate or what I'm doing, but I take full cognizance of knowing that there's some dreams in her heart that I also share. So there is forethought and preparation, but it must come out from the place of, again, let me give this nice scripture in Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 27. It says something that we need to remember. King James Version, I believe, says it this way. 24:27. Prepare thy work without, make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. So a man must not go into marriage without a certain measure of preparation. I understand not being prepared for marriage and the trauma that does to a man, and why it comes out so often that women think men don't have a plan. Because if you're not prepared and you haven't done certain elements in developing your manhood, then when you bring a woman into that situation, you are you are creating a greater disaster in the situation. Understand? Because you already can't take care of yourself. Father, so to bring that precious creature called a woman, that intriguing element. And it's so important for us as far as, again, so I'm going to put down and lay down the first two tracks, forethought and preparation. God bless. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bishop Gary. Brother Pierre, what do you say?
I certainly want to agree with Bishop Gary, but I just want to maybe make it just a little bit simpler, very simple. Purpose, okay, and being equally yoked, and that has nothing to do with the same religious denomination or so. When two persons come together in marriage, you basically have a union of strangers. These two persons are absolute strangers. during the time of courtship, you try to get as much information on the other person as possible. And these days, a lot of times we don't, and I'm using the premise that Bishop Gary talked about. We just use our eyes and not necessarily spend the time to flesh out what that person is like, okay, to have an understanding how that person thinks, etc. But if individuals do not have purpose, you basically find yourself lost in a relationship. Okay, you need to understand why you got involved in this relationship in the first place, and where am I going to lead this lady that I get married to? Where are we going? What is the purpose? What purpose do I have for my life? Okay, and I like what Bishop Garvey said, because I mean, let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve met a garden prepared. All right. And the instruction was, look, you need to tend this. You need to cause it to multiply and bear fruit. All right. And so there is a need for really and truly, and God set the example for having the things there already, preparing that nesting there already so that we can develop on it and we can have a common understanding of where we actually heading. We cannot have a common understanding if we are not equally yoked. If we are not equally yoked, if we don't have the same educational background, if we don't have the same spiritual background, how we view things and how we look at problems and what skills we try to bring to the problem to solve it. If we have a different mindset, it will take some time for that to kind of mesh together. And that is where the two different rivers meet and the clashing comes. An elderly woman said this to me a few years ago. I think she has passed and gone to the great beyond. And she said, look, the first 7 years of marriage is the most difficult. If you can weather that, and you all come out smiling, it means that you have overcome a great feat. And those words I never forgot those words. It might be more than 7. I don't know, right? But the issue is that is what she said, and it stuck with me. You will have a meeting of minds, especially in the very early part of your marriage, and especially as the honeymoon feeling begins to wane. All right, when a honeymoon feeling go and life begins to take over, you have the clashing of issues. But if we purpose in our hearts that we have a common goal and we are carrying this burden, this load, this yoke together, having the same understanding, I think certainly you can be a victor over the issues of life.
You know, you gentlemen are truly amazing, and I appreciate the experience and expertise that you bring to these questions. But you have given us some real high-level responses to this question, right? High level. I want to bring it down to day-to-day terminology and real issues. Okay, so let me kind of recap what you did. Bishop Gary talked about preparedness, that sometimes you go into a marriage without the proper preparation to deal with the issues that may come, especially in the early stages of marriage. And you talk about forethought, and those are all high level, right? And each of those could be broken down into multiple pieces. And Brother Pierce said purpose, which is again another high level. You know, you each come into the marriage with your own sense of what purpose is, but you don't have a united purpose to work from. And also being equally yoked. And we know equally yoked is a concept that people have different ideas of what that really means. And I'm glad you gave the example of, I'm not necessarily talking about attending the same church or from the same religious background and so forth. So equally yoked, again, is a concept that is pretty broad and could involve lots of different things. But I want you to really get down in the weeds with us right now. Give me some some small examples of things that couples in the first stages of marriage, in the first few months of marriage, the first few years of marriage, tend to struggle with and have conflict with in their marriage.
I think I want to start. Let the bishop bring the deeper, more philosophical issues to the fore. One of the things I know create a lot of problems, especially early in the marriage, is the issue of money.
Mhm.
The issue of money. Okay. Who's making more? What type of job do I have? How do I move away from being the all-one person, all right, to now becoming one with your partner?
Mhm.
All right. And when I say all one, it basically means alone.
Me,
Being
myself, and I.
somebody that was very independent, making money, banking money, having you have a purpose. By age 35, I should have $40,000 in the bank. Okay. How do I mesh somebody into my life as it relates to finances?
Mhm.
One partner might be very extravagant, wanting this, that, and the other, and the other one might be very reserved. How do we pull this together to make a marriage work? And that is why I said the issue of purpose. So it means, therefore, that we must have an idea, a goal, something that we have to achieve as a unit, that we could pull our resources together and work towards that. All right. One of the things too that young marriages may want as a goal is to maybe purchase a piece of land, to purchase a house. And so we are working towards that. So that it gives us now something to focus on. It gives us something to be united together in achieving. All right. And it sometimes create that unity. It engenders unity, but you will have little conflicts, even in doing that. I could remember, and this is a little joke, in building the house. I said, okay, well, you would look at my wife. I told my wife, you would look at the internal designs and the colors and all of that, and I would just do the structure and those kind of stuff. But we had to design a veranda wall. I mean, a very simple thing, very, very simple. Okay. And with me, it doesn't really matter. So she was saying there's a strip of white I would like to get in the veranda wall, and the top and the bottom, just that wall would have a brown kind of color. And I said, no, just paint the whole thing in brown. That created, I never thought that a simple thing like that would have created such a great conflict, So I say, hello. After a while, I just had to put my arms up in the air and I said, okay, you do that, because at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable. Okay. So, so I surrendered. I really did surrender.
That's great. You start stepping into a woman's design ideas. You're stepping into muddy waters. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So finances, definitely, and setting goals, financial goals, absolutely. Bishop Garraway, you want to add to that?
Well, yes, and I prepare beautiful answers.
Thank you.
I will say, they tell us, and I agree, I concur, money, sex, and communication, and the two senses, naivety in the sense of ignorance can create a problem, and then former experiences can create a problem, and expectations. And that's why, again, preparations and discussions. For me, many times if I'm doing any marital counseling, to me, I'm trying to get the people to communicate and to talk. I know if I can get them, because I see marriage as a continual conversation. There's never a position where I can leave a person and say, okay, everything is going to be okay. You understand? Because it's a constant communication. And once that communication goes off key, then it's like playing a symphony and somebody didn't come to practice.
Yeah.
They play a note that is off. That is the thing. That discordance is what creates the problem in the relationship. But to try to get them to speak in a way where they can handle even when that comes up. And I think at some point in time we dealing with that whole aspect of conflict management is important, you know. But again, talking and discussing the matters over and over. For me, well, I think it's later now. We're actually going to deal. I don't want to jump the gun. It's something else. Something is so much in my heart, but it's the idea of money, sex, and communication is the problem. And the Bible said, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they were old, they will not depart from it. And when you have that culture clash, and you don't have adaptability and wisdom, then you end up in problematic situations. Bible says, by wisdom a house is built, by understanding it established, and through knowledge shall the chambers there be filled with good and pleasant riches. Proverbs 24:3-4. And therefore, that is extraordinarily important. So, to me, if you pick the wrong kind of person up front with the wrong mindset, then you have to be, you're going to be playing defensive marriage all your life. But defensive marriage, it's like if you married a traumatized spouse and you're constantly trying to heal that person rather than going forward. And let me just say this, I believe everybody deserves love, even bad people, bad men, bad women. God sometimes puts people to love them. And sometimes maybe that is your purpose, to marry somebody who's difficult. And God will reward you. You know? But money, sex, and communication tend to be three major scenarios.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those are great. Those are great. Just to throw a few others in the mix, just knowing how to run a family, just knowing how to, and for the pay you talk about leaving oneness, singleness, oneness, just me, myself, and I, and becoming one with another person, and knowing how to manage that family and not getting so caught up into who is submitting to whom, and focusing on how we can run this family together is very important. So those are really good. And for some families, for some marriages, dealing with, especially early, dealing with things like addiction and other trauma induced behaviors that could definitely affect the marriage. Toxicity. Sometimes, we mentioned the importance of marrying the right person. If you marry a toxic spouse, then you'll be living a very toxic life, right? So those are some of the things. And expectations is key. And I saw that in the chat. Expectations, being able to manage and understand each other's expectations, and to become united with the expectation for the family. I'm looking at the chat. Let me just read a few things in the chat.
You can go to the chat, and then I just wanted to make a point. So you go ahead.
For the newly married couples, I heard a lot of chatter regarding sharing of chores around the household. That, that's real, right? That's real, right?
That is real. Go ahead.
And then Pastor Jones says another problem is personality mismatches. Marrying someone with an entirely different personality and learning how to manage that is important. Go ahead, Brother Pierre.
Right. One of the things that a lot of times we ignore is the person's family background. What family did they come from? How were they socialized in that particular family? How do that particular family handle problems? What's that family's consideration as it relates to money, as it relates to the same thing, communication, and even sex? All right? Because persons, they don't just come up in a vacuum. They come up from a family. And sometimes you may have a family that is quite disruptive, quite unstable. And I always tell people that love sometimes choose the wrong people. All right? We have to kind of iron out some of the issues after. But understanding family background is one of the things too that we must pay attention to. Again, I used to always like to listen to very elderly persons because they are filled with wisdom and experience. And they would tell you things like, you know, you need to pay attention. Check how this young lady, you know, functions within her family, or check how this young man treats his mother, etc. All right. So those are some of the things
Mhm.
that, you know, we must pay attention to. Now, as it relates to the issue of household and chores and all of that, you know, traditionally, we tend to say, okay, well, the woman's place is in the kitchen and she has to take care of the house and so forth. But I always tell persons when they get into marriage, they have to work that out,
Mhm.
so that they know they are comfortable in doing what they do. Because the truth is, both husband and wife might be working. Okay, they work, and you can't just depend on one partner just to carry that brunt of relationship, to take care, to clean the house, and all of that. That it must be something that we have an agreement with,
Mhm.
something that we do together as a family. At the end of the day, this is your space. This is not just her space that she has full responsibility, and you sit down and watch a television and cock up the foot and look at the sports. No.
Mhm.
It must be shared and must be a shared responsibility. And
Absolutely.
additionally, one other thing the last thing I want to mention, one of the things that create problems sometimes is a child coming very early after marriage.
Yeah.
That is something that sometimes creates some conflict. According to a good pastor, I pause.
Well, let me say this, all right? So let me create a report here. In my marriages, I don't do any household work, okay? But I handle 100% of the expenses. It doesn't matter what it is. That's my responsibility. That's the way we have chosen. My wife, if my wife wants a plane, she can get a plane. You understand? But then we are more senior type relationship, all right? And of course, I brought her into my country. She's from another country. She can't work here for at least 5 years, but she is a scientist and she has ideas and she's building them out on the side. And I'm facilitating that so she has a hobby time. That's kind of like a hobby that eventually we'll see as she transplants a bit of some South Africa to Trinidad. Let me just say this too, because along with understanding communication and connectivity onto community, we have to understand his needs, her needs. We have to understand love languages and then culture and personalities.
Yeah.
That is, according to some structured belief, they believe, okay, like when there's a way direction in which we tend to fall in love. So you find that you will always fall in love. Most of the time you'll fall in love with that type of personality. But the person that you fall in love with, they will not love you the same unless you are. That is, chlorics fell in love with sanguine. Sanguine fall in love with melancholics. Melancholics fall in love with phlegmatics, and fall in love with phlegmatics fall in love with chlorics. Only melancholics just say fall in love with each other. It's only temperament that can have serious love. On the other direction is what you call servile love. So what you find is that you will be passionate for your spouse, but your spouse cannot naturally find that passion for you. Their love for you will be out of devotion and out of decision. And this is important for people to understand, because sometimes some women are made to think that because they don't feel passion for their husband, that something is wrong. But there's them personalities that it's not natural for them according to a belief structure in psychology. So you will be passionate, you will jump through fire for that woman, but she will not naturally, she will have to think about going through the fire for you. And it doesn't mean that she doesn't love you. It just means that the psychology is different. And again, I don't know how deep we want to go, but it's important to understand this aspect of it, because a lot of times people say, well, I don't feel love from a spouse anymore. This agape love is decision-making love based upon duty and responsibilities. And when we begin to understand that and enjoy doing that, then we'll understand the growth that comes in. Remember, last week somebody asked a question whether we are spending too much time on marriage, because in heaven there'll be no marriage. But I try to explain the fact that marriage is a demonstration of relationship between Christ and the church. It's about connectivity and communication onto community. Understand? And we learn community in the family realm. And you can find the people who have greatest difficulty of being devoted and serving in the house of God also have dysfunctional communities from which they came out from in the context of their family. You understand? People give pastor trouble, go back and see if they're giving their husband trouble or their wife trouble, because it flows over, you
Right.
know? So
Right.
it's a training ground. So, so we have to understand there's some limitations in it, etc. So let's say my wife has a personality that I may want to jump over Niagara Falls for her. She may not necessarily feel that for me, but she will demonstrate her love to me in a different dimension, etc. This is important for people to understand, because again, when some people feel guilty, and sometimes they think that's the end of their relationship, and it's not the end of the relationship. You understand? So,
And I'm glad you explained that, because I mean, Jesus tells us how a man should love his wife and how a woman should love her husband, and it's totally different, right? And I like the fact that he says that you should love your wife as Christ loved the church, which means that you will jump into Niagara Falls and you will jump into fire without thinking for us. But we got to think about it a little bit. We got to make a decision.
Yeah, y'all gonna be thinking about the children. Y'all gonna be thinking about all.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about. A lot to think about. I love it. All right. Let's go on to question number 2. All right. What about those conflicts that cannot be avoided, such as loss of a child, elder care, taking care of elderly parents and so forth, taking care of, other people in the family, things that might put a burden on a couple. And that burden may be financially, it may be emotionally, it may be physically, but it puts a burden on the couple. These are not ordinary disagreements, but stresses that may affect each person differently. And it goes back to what you said, Pastor Gary, about looking at, and both of you said about the differences in families, right? What suggestions do you have for stresses that what suggestions do you have for Christian couples to deal with conflicts that arise from individual emotional stress?
That's okay.
I looked at that question. I looked at that question, and it brought back some memories in my own life. Many months ago, I lost my first son through a vehicle accident. Right, and I was married then. He was about maybe close to 30 when it actually happened, and that destroyed that marriage. Okay, I think it had a lot to do. One, you never saw that coming. If it was something, maybe a sickness, you might have been better prepared. And it took some years for me to be able to rationalize around it. Okay, but shocks like that, I don't even call it, I call it a shock for the marriage. If not handled well, can really do a number of on individuals and certainly on marriage. One of the first things that I think that I drew closer to was I drew closer to God, right? And that you within yourself, there was a lot of within myself, I had a lot of conflict. What if, how could I have prevented this? There's a lot of blame that you give and you accept. All right. And one of the things too is that communication broke down. All right, there's a breakdown of communication. There is that grieving period that sometimes just shut people up. There is that grieving period that causes you just to withdraw and to just seek solace. All right. And that sometimes can create problems for your partner. Right? It creates a lot of problems, a lot of weight for your partner. Now, I'm saying this in hindsight because I've recognized it after the fact. All right, after the fact. What too would bring some ease is finding the right people to talk to.
Yeah.
Because there are sometimes you go to persons and they give you some advice that certainly you would not want to. You may want to hear it at the time because it might stroke some of the issues that you're having, but it is bad advice. Really, really bad advice. Okay. So eventually, what happened that for years after marriage broke down, and I just basically went into a shell, and I had to resolve some issues within myself to be able to overcome that.
Yeah.
Right? There was a lot of pain, a lot of pain. And sometimes when a marriage is young, sometimes just being able to deal with that pain is very, very difficult. Very, 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 very difficult. And if you have each other, a lot of times you just basically, like a ping pong ball, you bounce blame against each other and it creates problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable.
Yeah, I must say that pain is not something you wish on your worst enemy, my brother.
I am telling you. I am telling you.
There's no pat answers for those things, you know. Let me just say this again. What things for me is expectation. I looked over my wife, sorry, and I kind of discerned some of the weaknesses in her life. And so therefore, when they come up, I'm not totally taken by surprise. All right. Secondly, one of the things I learned is that when God put people around you and there's a conflict situation, it's because God firstly wants to deal with you. That's why Jesus, all the instructions in Matthew chapter 5, when conflict comes up, is about you, not the other person. So offer them the extra mile when they force you to go 1 mile. You know, turn the other cheek, give the coat, your responses. So I learned that God is not putting fire on 100% goal. So that anytime conflict comes up, one of the things I try to look at is, Gavin, why are you responding like this? What it is in you that God is trying to deal with? I remember last year being at dinner with my pastor from Harlem, church in Harlem I have responsibility for, and he saw me a little upset on the table, and he said, you know, afterwards we were talking privately, and he said, in 20-something years, he has never seen me upset. You know, he thinks I'm ice. But something happened at the table, and he didn't know, and it upset me. But my response to him was that I'm under the deep dealings of God. You understand? God is dealing with me. You understand? Even though she may have done it, I may have not liked what she did, etc. And I learned that when I respond like that, it creates solutions much faster, because I'm looking to see what inside of me first. I know it sounds very theoretic, but it's practical for me where I'm at in my life. And so I ask God from that standpoint. Again, too, when there's conflict, the Bible never said the aim is to win. The Bible said the aim is to win your brother.
That's correct.
Some people say, I'm talk to the monkey gonna know which tree to climb up. That is not Christianity. Christianity, talk to your brother to win the brother.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So the aim is to build the network. Again, too, when you look over certain things, when I married my wife, she had her mother's age, etc. So I understand there's certain measures of responsibility there. You know, actually last year her favorite uncle died, but he died at the same time when I was having a problem with one of my sons, and I started getting ill, so I couldn't release her. And I mean, I think she was angry with me, she didn't talk to me like 3 days. But afterwards she came out and she said God spoke to her. But as soon as the situation died down, we jump on a plane and we flew across to Africa. You know, this is not like you're visiting around the corner.
Right.
A lot of money, right? And everything like that. But once she knows that I have an interest in heart, etc., I think the more somebody sees the way you respond, I think I learned the more grace I give her, the more grace she gives me. That's what I'm learning in the relationship. You know, I'm setting the tenor for the relationships. You know, there's some things I told her up front before we got married. You know, she asked me some things, and I told her my reality about me. I don't know if she remembers it, you know, but the whole idea, sometimes we try to present such a sweet face of ourselves before we get married, that the woman think that she's marrying St. George or St. Christopher or one of those things like that. You know, it's good sometimes to let people know that you're human and you have shortcomings, etc. So when it comes up, it's not a traumatic event, you know. Also, too, for me, because of, again, the nature of my wife's family, her grandfather had 80 wives, 200 children, 800 grandchildren. So my wife has 800 cousins, but in their culture, they're considered brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So I stuck off with 800 in-laws. So I expect certain types of reality because I am the one perceived as coming from America. So there's dimensions I deal with, certain prioritizations we do, etc. And my wife is understanding this and she's protecting me. But at the same time, I also understand my responsibility to these people because of somebody that God has favored. Right. So again, to boil that down, again, have the expectation. If you think you're marrying a Disney princess and they all live happily ever after, my friend, then you're going to be traumatized.
Yes.
You know, the more you can understand your spouse and understand the falling shorts they've had previously, and I listen carefully to my wife upbringing. I listen sometimes when she shares trauma, and I say, "Oh, this is that." In a sense, so I realized, okay, I have to be more careful when I deal with this issue because my tone can bring back memories, understand, or my dismissiveness can bring back memories. So my part of my job as a husband is to be a priest to my wife, to bring healing to her, to be a prophet, to bring a sense of direction, and to be a king to pay some of the bills.
Correct. I just want to pinpoint something that you said earlier. And it had to do with you setting the pace for the direction in which your family would go. And that is so very true. Now, my wife and I sat down and we were just, reminiscing and talking about where we're going in the future. Both of us are on the verge of changing jobs, etc., etc. Right? Well, I did my job change already. She's just about to do that. So we are talking about relationship, and so we decided to call our children to find out their perspective on our relationship. And that was trust me, that it was an eye opener. I never realized how observant children are, how perceptive they are, how analytical they are. Trust me, I say no, something wrong with these children because they were very, very analytical to the point where they really surprised me, really surprised me. But at the end of the day, they saw us model relationship in front of them. Okay. And they were able to say, Mommy, Daddy, real love you. First of all, they asked, I hope it's not a divorce or legating. So I said, but why y'all jump to that? He said, nah, Daddy. That my big son said, nah, I'm seeing it in other relationships and so on. And so on. And he started to express how he would feel if that was the case. All right. And all of them, we had them separately and then, but just hearing that said that, you just might be doing something correctly because they looked at you and they saw how you talk, they saw how you behave, they saw some of your weaknesses, some of your faults, and some of the high moments, some of the great moments. All right. So I'm saying to myself, if that was not done consciously, if it was not a conscious effort to ensure that we modeled certain behaviors in front of them, it means that our family might have been going in a direction that you don't necessarily want it to go. So I just wanted to bring that because it happened just a few days ago. And trust me, I'm still reeling from the expressions. From the expressions that these children and the favorite one, well, I can't say my favorite, but she is my last daughter. She likes her daddy really bad, and I'm telling you, daddy could do no wrong. because you could do no wrong.
That is wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, because it's good that children can see you modeling
Yeah,
the behaviors that you expect them to emulate, and for them to see that and to share that, and that's a great thing to do. And it's risky. It's very it puts you in a vulnerable state to ask your
yes,
children to express what they think about your relationship, but it's also very gratifying when they can express the things that you would like them to be learning from you, and to know that they are learning those things is really, really awesome. Let me go to the chat here. I think something just came up. Oh, okay. Pastor Griffith says he liked that you brought the children together and hear them evaluate your relationship. And yes, it makes you really proud. Absolutely.
indeed.
All right. So we're getting close. So let's get to question number 3. Again, I encourage those of you who are listening, we have a great audience here this evening. Put your comments or your questions in the chat. Many Christian leaders apply the biblical teaching that the woman must submit to man, especially in conflicts. This approach often kicks the bucket down the road, and instead of a beautifully flowing stream, you have those constant fights, which often leads to divorce. What does the Bible say about a woman who is always bickering? You'd rather go on the rooftop to get away from her. All
Yes,
right,
yes.
we don't want that. So is there a better biblical approach that we may have missed for couples to resolve conflicts? Can you think of another biblical approach that's out there that we would like to zero in on, and not just focus on the fact that women must submit to men?
I believe women must submit to men. Two rulers in the house. And do it more than one head is a dragon, as we pastors say. However,
We're listening.
one day God told me very simply, he said, Garvin, when I said women must submit to men, I was not trying to create a new slave class.
Yes.
It was that simple. And he said that what I was trying to have 2 shots at the family's purpose. And then he gave me examples. He says, Nabal did not understand that he was raised up to support the coming king of Israel.
Yeah.
Abigail understood, and she saved the family.
Yeah.
Isaac, although he was the one carrying the covenant, was unable to discern the difference between his sons, having loved the pottage of or the meals, the venison of Esau. The wife understood which son was ordained to carry down the purpose, etc. And so over and over, if you search scripture, you can find these scenarios. Joseph actually wanted to divorce Mary. So there are certain dimensions. So when your marriage is purpose-oriented, as a man, you carry your leadership with caution, because you understand that marriage is God didn't make you a straw god over your wife. You are the leadership of a team. And if you mistreat your wife, then God doesn't hear your prayers. And I wonder if sometimes that's why some prime ministers are good at leaders of opposition and poor when they become prime ministers, because they're mistreating their wives and nothing there in the cabinet can go through. And then I'll leave that there on the side. All right. And it's an imperative for men. It's found in 1 Peter chapter 3, as well as Malachi chapter 2, that God would literally, you could be crying out. So therefore, a man's tone in dealing with his wife is extraordinarily important. But I believe somebody must carry the final buck. The buck has to stop someplace, and I believe that a man has that prime responsibility. I believe, again, the Bible says a man must wash his wife with the water of the word to represent himself without spot or wrinkle. And again, that wrinkle is not garments, it's about wrinkled forehead. It means you have to bring your wife to the place of peace. And if you cannot bring your wife to the place of peace, then you don't have the power of unity working in your family, and therefore there's something you need to work on. And again, so if you've not prepared yourself in the field and prepared yourself beforehand, and you're trying to build a house, then your foundations are off. Yeah, because you can fool a lot of people. I could fool a lot of people for a lot of time, but you can't fool your wife for a long time. So you have to know that you're steady and secure. Again, too, let me say this. There's something I'd like to talk about: a traumatized wife. There's a metaphysical interpretation of a scripture. When I say metaphysical, it's a different dimension. where Joshua told the two men to go into the house of the harlot and bring out the woman. So that when a man has a wife who has been traumatized like Rahab, where she was a madam, it takes the priests, it takes the head of the tribe of Judah. It was a prince that was able to deal with her. And she eventually became, people don't realize she's actually the mother of Boaz, which is the great grandmother of David. But it took prayer and praise. So if your wife has been through a lot of difficult things in life, she's been promiscuous, she has been hurt, she grew up an adoptive parent, she went, etc., you are going to have to spend more time in the presence of God, knowing God, etc., and being able to walk out those principles of Matthew chapter 5, to rejoice when differences come, to be able to give extra when demands are made, to be able, while trusting God, etc. I know, again, somebody saying may sound flowery, etc., but these are real things that we can live out.
That's absolutely true. Brother Pierre?
Yes.
The baton has been passed. Oh, please unmute.
Yeah, I do agree with everything that Bishop Garvey said, but I like to put it very simply. You have a vehicle and you could only have one driver. Right? You have a co-pilot, okay, but it's one driver you have. All right, that's the way I look at it. I just want to read two scriptures. One is taken from Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 3, which says, through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. All right, through wisdom, through knowledge, through godly wisdom, you build a home, you build a family. And by understanding, by just getting a full complement of what your situation is, that is how it is established. That's how the foundations are built. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 6 and 7. Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well and are not afraid with any amazement. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto a weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. The same point that Pastor Bishop Garvey talked about. Again, when I talk to men, I talk to men on that. Sometimes if you treat your wife bad, there are times God would not listen to your prayers. Right? The leadership that you need to have within your family is servant leadership. You know, you are there to really and truly serve your family, to ensure that your family is protected, they are provided for. You become the priest, the king, the advisor, the doctor, the everything, the psychologist, the counselor. That's your role in the family. All right, and you have to, and by doing that, by giving that servant leadership, it would be easier for your female partner to submit themselves to you. Right? It makes it much easier. Again, purpose. You have to have purpose. You have to have a goal, a drive, an aim, and you know you lead your family. I do agree with everything else that Bishop Garvey said.
May I say this? Because what I found sometimes, and I see Pastor Anthony putting some questions there.
I see, we'll get to it.
We have to consider this thing about love. Because the Bible said, do I give my goods to the poor and have not love? Do I give my body to be burnt and have not love? So you can do all those sacrificial things and not have love. So love must be in a certain context, which has to do with obedience to God, and it has to do with purpose from God. You understand? Because the reason why I think that Rebecca was not cursed is because even though it may look as though it was selfish, it was the purpose of God, because God said, Jacob had I loved, Esau have I hated. When those ladies disobeyed the king of Egypt, when the Bible said we should obey kings and etc., the Bible said God gave them houses. You understand? God gave them families, because there was that commitment to purpose, so that Just like our prime ministers in our regions don't rule because they got election. Just because they're elected, they must rule in the context of the Constitution. You understand what I'm saying? The Constitution is higher than them. And the same thing, when you get married and you have no constitution, and in Pastor Anthony's book, he takes a time to deal with things like watchword for the family, etc. And instead of a family has no reason. In other words, if you cannot, when I got married to my wife, I had to sit down in front of a council, about 10 princes in the country, etc., and explain why I love this woman, where I'm taking her, all these. I had to give some explanation besides the cows, all right?
Right.
And I think in our culture, a man just snatch a woman and they go in a house and there's
Yeah.
a man getting married if only one dollar can come.
Yes.
It changes the whole disposition. So if
Right.
so my wife now, she can say, well, honey, before we got married, you said X, Y, Z. You understand what I'm saying?
That's
And,
correct.
you know, and while yes, we can grow, etc., it still has to do again with the growth in our Christian walk with God and that aspect of developing the rapport or community and communication. So that must still continue. I know there will be times when there will be some things that will surprise all of us. But again, as a Christian, for me, you have to be if your relationship with the Lord is not real, then you open up your relationships to all kind of different nonsense.
Oh man. Oh yes.
To keep up with the Joneses, if you're trying to keep up with the Mary,
Yes.
or whatever it is like that. So therefore, there has to be a growth in a relationship that is commensurate with your growth in a relationship with the Lord, etc.
I read something that says that when a husband loves his wife sacrificially, it's a beautiful thing. And that he understands that his leadership and being the head of the home means that God holds him accountable for what happens in that home. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes along with being the head and the leader and being accountable and being submitted to. And I love Pastor Jones put the scriptures in the chat where he talks about wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as unto the Lord. And it says in Ephesians 5:21 that submitting yourself one to another in the fear of the Lord. So submission is not a one-way street. There are times when submission has to go both ways, and submission does not mean doormat. And I think that's a perspective that many women often walk away with. That if I have to submit to him, I'm his doormat.
There's something coming out there that has me a little nervous, and I want, because our women in our generation, your ladies have a problem with this thing about submission and obedience.
Yeah.
They're in the Bible. But I want you to understand something. My wife scares the living daylight out of me when she turns to me and say, honey, whatever you want, whatever you decide. You understand? My wife said, because my wife, that's why we men are leaving you women in the career. Because it doesn't, as a Christian, it doesn't make me beat my chest. I am to be more cautious now because I have responsibility.
Responsible, absolutely.
When we come and we say now, when the Bible says, now I know sometimes there's the argument, and I saw it's there in the comment about submit yourself one to the other. Some people say that's for marriage. Some people don't believe it's for marriage. They believe it's actually a generation as Christian, because the Bible does say in Titus chapter 2, wives or older women teach the younger women how to obey their husband, that the word of God is not blasphemed. So that they're placed in your Christian walk where you've got to know that sometimes your husband may have to make a decision that you can't see in the present moment. Right? And I know that's a difficult scenario, but then that's why you need to know the quality of man that you're marrying and the fact that you've been led of God in that particular arena, that God will protect you. So I want us to be conscious, because it's I can tell you, part of the reason it took me many, many years to find a wife is because I told you the story already. You know, the woman was an attorney. You know, she wants a 6 foot plus man who works in 6 feet figure, who cooks. By the time you're done, she wants to live in a hotel and do nothing. Understand? She's not even a floor mat. So we have to be very careful, etc., that we don't go too far east or too far west. So we don't want men thinking that they're the boss and God of their home, but they have to understand servant leadership, and therefore they must be useful spouses. But at the same time, in the short run, if there's a conflict, somebody has got to be given that nod. Otherwise, we will never get anything done.
Right.
I think that, and I said in my experience,
but again,
that makes me boastful.
Right. And for
But
the women,
again,
as I said, and for the women, it does not mean that you become a doormat, and it does not mean that you can't have an input in the decision making. But as the head of the home, the man makes
the final decision.
the decisions.
Listen, it's a stupid man.
Men, wait a minute, let me finish this. Let me finish this. But what I want men to realize is that because they are placed in that position of headship and being submitted to, that they are the ones that are being held accountable.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
The accountability ends with you, like
That's
with
right.
Adam. He was the one who was accountable.
That's right.
When God gave that order, he's the one who God says don't. And he's the one held accountable. And his decision caused everyone to reap the consequence. So go ahead, Bishop Gary, go ahead. You have some more to say.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you in the sense of a man has that responsibility. But if we take away manhood or we take away the responsibility for men, you have a lot of men nowadays who I find it very passive. They're very, they're almost, I can't even call them womanly. They're below woman. I don't know if there's I always want to say there's a third group.
Because women will step up, right?
Yeah.
But we need to have the men who are willing to make decisions, but at the same time, it's a wise man. Bible says wisdom is found in the multitude of counsel. That's what I want to know. What's my wife's opinion? What are you seeing, honey?
Right.
And my wife went to do some things in South Africa for a month. Her uncle dies on the penultimate date. Understand? I am missing my wife for a whole month. I now have to agree, honey, okay, take 2 more weeks to make sure, and represent the family. Or cooking, washing, cleaning, all the things I don't normally know I'm doing. Well, not the washing part, but washing where is the thing, right? And taking care of the house, right? But the thing about it is that it's a wise man who listens and hears. You talk to your pastor, you talk to your pastoral friends, you talk to other people you consider, and a woman is 90% right. You understand? Just again, it's that 10% when she wants to give you fruit cocktails and stuff like that from the wrong tree,
Okay, let me jump to the chat. The question from the Henrys: should a woman submit to a man who is not a good leader of the home or family, or is blind submission expected?
Again, let me throw that out. Obedience and submission is 2 different things.
Right.
So that Nabal, Abigail demonstrated that she could disobey God. Rebecca deceived the husband, disobeyed the husband. But submission is an attitude. It isn't so woman, that thing where the woman puts her hand akimbo and say, you're not no man, you're a manico. They happen in the Trinidad thing. That is the problem more so. And I think when a woman, my wife is always soft. My wife is gentle personality, strong person, but gentle person, soft talker.
Gentle giant.
So anytime you see her, she moves out of that. She has my attention 200%. But if she's accustomed being loud and voiced, then she can't. How does she catch my attention?
Yeah.
And I warned all women that every man has an inbuilt mute button. Understand? And on when men feel dishonored. Understand? So you can get on her fire. He said, okay, yes, honey. And he sat down there because he hearing the tone, not even what you say. So if you want to convince a man, speak softer and speak slower.
That's correct.
Find that your authority goes up immediately in terms, his attention goes up immediately. But when that Caribbean market woman thing,
it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Men will just turn off. They will just turn off. Yeah, you turn everything off.
But a man does not have absolute authority. Well, if a man gives a woman an instruction that breaks the word of God, she has a right to obey God's word. Your husband cannot tell you to go fornicate, commit adultery, to steal, to break the commandments of God, any more than the high priest could have told the apostles not to preach the word of God. So that's my belief structure in it. The greatest commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, etc., and to love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
Pastor.
I just want to make just maybe two comments. One,
Yes.
we do have the infiltration of this new age secular thinking, and that interferes with how persons view submission. Okay, how persons view submission. We do have the this women's rights movement, all right, and that interferes with the whole issue of submission. Women now are led to believe that, you know, they should achieve everything professional, they should make as much money as they can, etc., etc. And in a lot of instances, there are women that are making more money than men. And I think I see Pastor Henry have a question there. If the woman by profession is a financial manager, should the man who knows nothing about finance be the final voice on family investment? Again, a family should have that opportunity to discuss issues. Again, a family should have purpose. They should have an aim. There should be a goal. For example, I don't like to deal with money. My wife did finances. She is one of the financial persons in the company that she works. So I depend on her to give financial advice. But at the end of the day, she would say to me, "Look, these are the facts. These are the advantages and disadvantages. And what do you think? Do you think that we go ahead with this?" All right. Now, that is my role as leader to say, yes, we do this because of the facts that you have laid out for me. All right. So, yes, at the end of the day, you know, given all the facts and everything, you have to make that final decision because she looks to you, understanding where we are going as a family. She looks to you to say, okay, whether we go this direction or not. And people would tell us that I would say kill and she would say bury, or she would say kill and I would say bury, right? But that is how we function, and we have been able to be successful in that regard. Again, we have a responsibility at the end of the day to each other, and I have a responsibility and have to give account for my role and responsibility for my family. I have to give account to God.
All right. Thank you for addressing that final question. Final words, 2 seconds each, because we are way beyond the time. But this is good. This is good conversation. Bishop Garraway, your final words.
Okay, again, we must not be afraid of the word of God. Anything that God commands us to do is for our benefit. When God says, you know, the older woman teach the younger woman how to obey your husband, that the word of God be not blasphemed, and husbands give leadership to your wife, etc. Wife, submit yourself to your husband. All these things are written for our benefit, but we must understand the intricacies of it, the depth of it, and understand that the law of love, God is love, and it covers all things. God is not putting us in a position to destroy women or for women to make men look badly, but it's extremely important that we work together in partnership to fulfill divine purpose. We have to rebuild the walls of marriage once again to bring our young people to a point of confidence that marriage can work and that it is useful and profitable for society. God bless you.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Perry.
And I again, I totally agree with that. The family is a very powerful unit in any society, in any country, any community, any village. And I think with programs like these, it gives a clearer perspective. It gives some clarity to how man and woman should function within the scope of marriage. Too often, you know, we hear about the culture, we hear about the tradition, we hear about the sort of domineering effect that sometimes men have over their families, and it has not benefited families. In fact, it has created more conflict than it's trying to resolve. We just need to go back to the Word of God, have a full understanding of what God's Word says. And I support Pastor Bishop Garraway by saying, when he gave his word, it was not to destroy us, not for us to lord over each other, so that but for us to be a united force, really and truly bringing some happiness, bringing some joy, some peace to the people that we have within the scope of family.
Thank you, gentlemen. Once again, this has been Real Talk Family Life. We focus on marriage, where the rubber hits the road, part 1. Please plan to join us next week for part 2, because we have some more questions that we need to address. I thank these gentlemen for sharing and being so transparent and sharing even personal experiences, and for the wisdom that you bring to this discussion. And I pray that it has been helpful to everyone who has tuned in today. I want to turn you over to Pastor Henry, and I want to recognize Pastor Griffith, Pastor Jones, Pastor Samuel, all of you gentlemen whose job is to help families, help to counsel and advise couples as they embark on marriage and raising resilient families. Pastor Henry, over to you, sir.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Neff, and thank you, Bishop Garway and Brother Pierre. And next week, as Dr. Neff said, we have a great program. We continue the discussion. Just to let you know, this month, Real Talk, we are going to do, we're going to go right to the end of the month, and then we're going to take a break in the month of May to do some planning and housekeeping and so on. And we are back on for June for 3 months. And then we take a break somewhere after the 3 months for a month again. And so look for Real Talk being done like that. We hope to be serving you every week for 9 months in the year, and we'll take 3 months of holidays. No, preparation. Yes, because it's before we with the 2 weeks, we used to have a week to, to break between.
Right.
So we don't have that now. So we just need to take that break. So just 3 more weeks in the month. So plan to be here with us and bring somebody with you. Pastor Samuel, good night. I see your camera is turned on. Just say good night.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's such a blessing to sit back and be educated and inspired by such great wisdom. Thank you, men of God and women of God, for being so vulnerable and transparent and sharing your heart with us. I really appreciate it very much. Thank you again.
Pastor Griffith.
Guys, good night. I typed so much, I know you need to hear my voice too, but that's all right.
Pastor Griffith.
Yes, you are free to use iOS. No copyright, that's all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Okay, so gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ, thank you for joining us. And in as much as there's no copyright, I pause.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, folks. Good night. God bless.
Please stop the stream, Pastor.
Yes.